Welcome to another exciting episode of Business Bourbon and Cigars. I'm your host, Scott Joseph, and today we're going to tackle a topic that I think every business owner needs to hear, and that's when, why, and how to sell your business. Doesn't matter if you're thinking about selling your business now, maybe in the future, maybe you're just wondering how much it's worth. This episode is going to bring you a ton of value. So today's guest is Marty Fahncke. He's a seasoned world-class marketer with over 30 years of experience in growing and scaling businesses. He's also had over 20 years of expertise when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. He's helped help businesses scale to literally over $1 billion in revenue and has executed over $400 million in mergers and acquisitions, transactions, I should say. We're going to dive into some of the critical topics today, and I love this one, the more valuable you are to your business, the less valuable your business might be. This could be probably some of the best or most lucrative advice a business owner might hear. So let's dive right in. Marty, welcome to Business Bourbon and Cigars.
I'm super excited to be here, Scott. Thanks for having me, and I hope to share some great knowledge for you and your listeners that's going to help them out.
Anybody that's got a business, not that they got to be thinking about selling it. They didn't have to think about it at the beginning. They didn't have to think about it in the middle, but you're doing a disservice to yourself by not thinking about it at all and at least not planning for it. So hopefully this, for the people that are planning it and for the people who haven't even thought about it, wakes them up a little bit and gets them in the right direction for that.
Well, here's a statistic that most business owners never think about. 100% of business owners will eventually exit their business in some capacity. 100%. Right. What does that look like? You need to have control of that. And most people don't think about it.
No, it's a great way to say it. All right. So share with us a little bit about your journey. I want to know the milestones that led you to become an expert when it comes to mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in my 20s, I started a business with some buddies. It was a little sporting goods product. As grassroots as it comes, we started it literally selling it at parks across the parks in our neighborhood. Eventually got it on television, did millions of dollars in sales. And 18 months after we started the business, a sporting goods company that was backed by a private equity firm came and offered us $1.5 million for the business. And we thought we were the smartest guys in the world and took the money and ran. That was my first introduction to acquisitions. I learned that I made a huge mistake at the time. What I didn't understand at the time was what a roll-up was. I didn't understand the power of having private equity-backed roll-ups. And if I was smart, what I would have done is not taken all cash at that time. I would have taken equity in the deal that the private equity firm was putting together. Because if I would have, that $1.5 million cash would have actually been about $25 million a few years later. But I wasn't smart enough to know that. So but that was my very first foray, and from there, I went on the other side, and I bought a business. Well, I started a business, an e-commerce business. We were doing about $1 million a year in revenue. This was in the early days, and I had a competitor, really fierce competitor. They were doing about $1.5 million in revenue, and I talked to my CEO. I'm like, how do we beat these guys? And he said, well, instead of beating them, we should see about acquiring them. So, okay. So my little $1 million business bought their $1.5 million business, and we put the two together. And so knowing that math, what do you think we did revenue wise within the next 2 years?
I'm going to say taking the two companies combined, I'm going to say whatever they were doing, I'm going to say triple.
Whatever they were doing, triple. Okay. So $4.5 million. Okay. And that's the range most people guess. So we were doing $1 million, they were doing $1.5 million. You put the two together, it's $2.5 million. Within 2 years, that combined entity did $30 million.
Oh my God.
In revenue. We would never, ever have done that separately. Their team happened to be really, really good. My team happened to be really, really good. And we happened to be even better as a combined force. And when we weren't butting heads and competing against each other. So as part of a bigger roll-up strategy, that was rolled up into a bigger entity and eventually went public and then was acquired a couple of years later. And then I went and started another company a couple of years later. And so it's funny, just today on my LinkedIn, somebody, a blast from the past, posted, I remember when you owned this company called Conference Call University, which was a little thing I started as a hobby. It eventually became what I called my six-figure hobby, because it was literally generating six figures in income. And it was just something I did a couple hours a week on the side. 2009 came around. My main business was struggling a little bit because of the economic crash, and I sold that business. I started it in 2005, sold it in 2009, sold it for a really nice six-figure exit, and from there I kind of started realizing there's something to this buying and selling businesses, and I started working much more intentionally in understanding how buying and selling of small businesses can help others and help myself, and eventually started I had so many people asking for help that we started Westbound Road, and now we advise and help coach people on both growing through acquisitions as well as selling their businesses for maximum value and to the right person at the right time.
I love the roll up in the second example you gave, where you had the 2.5 million go within 2 years to 30, because let's just say, for simple math, if you were doing $1 million, they were doing 2.5 before you guys merged, or one acquired the other, whatever the technical term was of that deal. If you just both said, all right, you're going to have 50% and 50% in terms of the shares, you still went from 1 to 15 million and 2.5 to 50. Both parties had to be ecstatic.
Mm-hmm.
So
everybody won.
So I got a couple questions specific to that deal.
Okay.
Because, somebody listening or watching us, right, they might be like, yeah, where can I look for opportunities like that?
They're everywhere.
But there's a flip side to that. So first, let's talk about what are some of the things that, because you always hear about the horror stories with mergers. Oh, the cultures didn't mix right and this and that. Talk to us briefly about that, but then talk to us about why this one works so well.
I'm going to talk about culture really, really quick. So again, at that time I was with a private equity backed company. I literally flew up to the first meeting with that company on our private jet to go meet with him. And once we were there, we were kind of going through. He was giving us a tour of the facilities, and somehow the topic of garbage cans got brought up. And of course, they had offices and they had a warehouse and they were doing shipping and all this kind of stuff. So all these facilities. And the topic of garbage cans got brought up because nobody in the offices or anywhere else was allowed to have a garbage can. Well, why? Because a garbage can is $8, but boxes are free. So if you need a garbage can, you go out to the warehouse, you get an empty box, you put it under your desk. Once that's full, you fold it up and you go out and take it to the dumpster. Why would I spend $8 on a garbage can when we have free disposable garbage cans out in the warehouse? So it's this. So you talk about culture fit, like. The owner of that company was as aggressively like cost cutting and savings and bootstrap as you could possibly be. Whereas my company we were private equity backed. So like literally I don't know how many garbage cans and gas I used in our private jet to go visit. So you'd think there'd be a huge culture clash, right? But the reality is that their scrappy bootstrapped, win at all costs mentality was a perfect fit to our corporate, organized, process driven business. And it just, they were what each of them needed. That business, honestly, was growing really rapidly. It probably would have imploded after a period of time because they were just flying by the seat of their pants. My business was growing nicely, but we didn't have that scrappy, like do anything to increase margins at all cost mentality. And so even though we had different cultures, we could tell we needed each other, and the skill sets that we brought, we could tell we needed each other. So culture is important. Fit is important, but it doesn't mean the cultures have to be the same. You want to look for a mesh.
Yeah. So I had I've been in business over 30 years, and just a few months ago exited one of my companies. I don't want to say envy. That's a horrible word. I admire the speed that you were able to do it in the first one, whether you made a mistake or not, you learned a lot from it and you still had good capital that probably freed up some things down the road. But man, also it's not just the speed you did the first one, but the frequency of these transactions. I just love that. How do you, I think one of the most common questions, and it's got to be like, what is my company even worth? So like, how do you help people determine that?
Yeah, so that's the big question everybody wants to know, right? What's my company worth? And the unfortunate thing is there's no easy answer. Your company has different value depending on who might buy it and for what reason. So, if you sell to an entrepreneur who wants to take over the company and run it kind of the way you've been running it and continue the business the way it's been run, that maybe have one amount of value, and the way they might purchase it through maybe an SBA loan, and the SBA is going to tell you what they will lend on it, which is definitely going to decide the value. You might sell it to a strategic acquirer, meaning maybe a bigger company who's in your space, who's looking to buy other businesses and roll them up or bolt them together. And they may have a different valuation because they may be looking at valuing your business less on the cash flow and more on maybe your book of business, or possibly your real estate footprint, or possibly your intellectual property that you have. So there's no one answer to what's my business worth. People are used to, with houses, you say, well, how much is my house worth? And a real estate agent comes in and they do comps and they say, well, other houses in your area sold for this and this many square feet footage, and they calculate it and they tell you what it is. And they think it's going to be the same for businesses, and it's really not, because there's more than 100 ways of valuing a business. And again, that it depends on what the buyer wants to give you the value for. It's not always what you think it is. I will say that generally a business owner is high in what they believe their value is versus the real value. 99% of the time, they overestimate the value of their business. So the best thing you can do is engage a professional to value your business now, so you do understand that, and use at least 3 different methodologies and 3 different sources of methodologies to give you all of the different variations, because there's no one number that a business is worth. It's a range. But bringing in a professional is really the only way to know that, unfortunately.
All right. So talk to us a little bit about what I mentioned earlier, because you've got a lot of companies that might be very top heavy, where the owner might be critical to the success of it, right? And they think that's great and there's some security, but why would you, because you say this a lot, right? Why does that potentially make the business worth less?
Yes. So that you kind of mentioned that in the introduction. The more valuable you are to your business, the less valuable your business is. So let me give you an example of that, an unfortunately sad example. What that means is that if you as the business owner are critical and integral to your business, that means that your business has little to no value outside of your existence. And so if you leave that business, the value of the business goes with you, and therefore you have not much to sell. I had a situation that happened just a couple of months ago. I got a call from a woman who said, hey, my husband has passed away. He's a plumber. He told me that before he died, he said that businesses sell for 1.5 times their revenue. No, sorry, I think at that time 3 times their revenue. And this business did, he did about $500,000. So I need to find a way to sell it for $1.5 million. And I said, okay, let's talk about what that looks like. What was his business? He's a plumber. Okay, he's a plumber. How many team members did he have? Well, he has a junior assistant. That's really it. I said, okay. What kind of assets and equipment were in the business? Well, he has his van. Well, what's his van? Well, it's a 12-year-old Ford Econo. Okay, so there's no value there. So what you have here is a tradesman who had a nicely paying job. He did not have a business. So first of all, to be very, very clear, businesses almost never are valued on revenue. That's a huge fallacy that a lot of business owners hear out there in the media completely false unless you're in the certain businesses like the software sector and a couple other really high-end businesses that might be valued on revenue. Most small businesses are valued on profit. And that can be defined as cash flow. It can be defined as SDE, which is seller's discretionary earnings, or it can be defined as EBITDA. But the reality is businesses are valued on profit, not revenue. Second of all, in the case of the plumber's wife, there is no value in that business. The plumber is the value. He's the one that was out doing the work. He's the one that has the license. There's no business there.
And the relationships.
And the relationships and the customers and everything else. I had to tell that poor woman who thought she had $1.5 million coming, you have nothing coming. Whatever you can sell the van and tools for is basically the value of the business. And that was a really tough conversation to have. And unfortunately, many business owners are in the same boat. They have this misconception of what their business is worth. They have this misconception of what it's worth based on their involvement with the business. And they're unfortunately making plans for the future based on that incorrect information. So if that person had built up his business so he had other plumbers out there doing work, other trucks out there moving without his involvement, even if he was still out there, turning pipe wrenches, if there was other parts of the business that could continue on without him, we could have found some value there. But because he was the business was worth zero. Typical business, even that has employees, where the owner is key to the business, they are the number one salesperson, or all decisions go through them, or all operational things go through them. You are hamstringing your business in its operations. First of all, your business is much less effective, much less profitable, and much less able to grow if you are the bottleneck. Trust me. And number two, you're definitely hamstringing the value of that business. We just sold a business in Illinois, an interior design business, 20-year-old business, and the owner had. She was an interior designer, so she was growing the business, and of course, she was integral to the business. Well, when she decided to sell, she realized she needed to be stepping out. So she worked for a couple of years to extricate herself from that business. The last year before we sold her company, she took more vacation than she'd ever taken. She literally 50% of her time was out of the office on vacation. Guess what? The business generated more revenue and was more profitable than it had ever been without her in the office, being the bottleneck. And that allowed the business to be sold for a really nice amount of money because she was not in control of the business. And doing all those things helped her accomplish her goal. And now she's living a wonderful retired lifestyle because she did the right things there.
So I'm fortunate. I've often said on here, like I've got car dealerships. My first business was marketing agency. I've done a very good job of elevating and delegating, not because of thinking about exit as much as some of the things that used to excite me became mundane to me, and I had to get the heck out of doing them because I was bottlenecking things. And a very similar story. I mean, now once I've got an incredible managing partner.
Yep.
And president at the agency, and it's doing better than it ever has because I got the hell out of his way and no two-headed monster and all that other stuff. But that's the whole reason I started B Plus Ultra is because I got to a point where I thought, oh, wow, I've gotten to where I want to be. All this income's passive. And I realized that's not what I thought it was going to be. That's not and I think it took me a while to get out of the agency just because I didn't have that next idea yet. It hadn't come to me yet. So, but it's interesting you say that. I go back to the plumber, the story you talked about that. His business probably would have been worth something had he had not died. In other words, which he probably could have, maybe not for the 1.5 million, right? The 3 times the revenue. But if he had agreed, hey, I'll stay on for the next 2, 3, 4 years while we build someone else, he probably could have got something out of that. But, he probably wasn't thinking I'm going to pass away and not have the entire revenue models destroyed with that. But that brings up another problem. If you do sell, I mean, do you really, as an entrepreneur or someone who's had no one telling them what to do and not being necessarily responsible to anybody other than your team, well, now you answer to somebody. And are you going to be good at that? And is that what are you willing to live through 2 or 3 years of watching someone else run what you built while you're still involved? I don't know if I could do that.
Not everybody can, and it's a consideration you have to think about, and that goes back to who do you sell your business to? Do you sell your business to somebody who, when they take it over, you hand them the keys and you walk away, or do you sell your business to somebody who you're going to stay involved for a couple of years, and hopefully it's part of something. There's a reason you're doing that, a part of something bigger or whatever. And can you do that? Most entrepreneurs are unemployable for sure, as you pointed out. So
I'd never hire me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm the same way. So that's part of your planning, though. Who's going to buy my business, and what does the post-acquisition situation look like, and how does that fit my lifestyle? Because those are decisions you need to make for yourself. And so if you know that beyond a shadow of a doubt that I am not going to take orders from somebody else, then you probably don't want to sell to somebody that's going to expect you to stay on for a year, 2 years, or 3 years post-sale. You probably want to sell to somebody who wants you out of the way. And that's fine. So that, and you're able to identify those buyers in advance.
So when is the right or wrong time to sell? I mean, at what point do you start thinking about it and planning for it?
So there's an old investing adage that is buy low and sell high. Interestingly, though, my experience working with thousands and thousands of business owners is they go the exact opposite. When your business is doing its best, that's the last time most business owners think about selling their business. Most of them don't think about selling until something has happened where either they're burned out, the business is struggling, whatever else, and then they try to sell the business because they don't know how to fix it. And so most business owners they sell low, and it's really, really frustrating because before I got full-time in acquisitions, I used to do a lot of advisory and consulting on growth. And a couple of times in my career, I identified the business that I was working with, and I might have been working with them for a couple of years or whatever. And I looked around and I said, right now would be the time you'd want to sell this business. If you sell your business right now, it's worth so much money. And then you can take that and do something else with. And almost never does a business owner listen to me. And then a couple of years later, they're like, oh, I wish I'd have sold, man. That was and so there's this euphoria when businesses are doing really well that business owners get, and they think that the uphill trend is always going to continue. And the reality is it rarely does. There are ups and downs with every business. And so what's the best time to sell? The best time to sell is when your business is doing really, really well. The better your business is doing, the more leverage you have and the more options you have. So that's tough for a lot of owners to think about, but I'm telling you, it makes a big difference. The other thing that we've noticed is once burnout happens, things start to go south really, really quick. And we've seen it time and time again where, business is doing really well and everything's going great for a couple of years, but the owners are working like crazy. And then one day they just burn out, and it is shocking how quickly things start to go south. And then they think they can turn it around, and then, well, we'll try this and we'll try that. And then, they call me, a year later, and their business is off by 60%. And they want to, and then they want to sell their business for a value that would have been what it would have been a year earlier. Yeah. It's like you've driven it into the ground. So
I went through.
To sell is when the business is rocking and rolling is the best time to sell.
Yeah, I went with our agency. I went through a 5-year pivot, and the reason that pivot took so long is because 3 of those years, 3.5 of those years, I was still thinking I was out, but I was still heavily involved. But the reality was I was trying to transition out of being involved, had nothing to go to. But in that process, to your point, the things that used to excite me no longer did. And it's not just burnout. When you lose that emotional drive to it, you better.
That's when you should get out. The moment you have,
That's right.
you wake up in the morning and you dread going into work, you dread going in, then you need to start looking at, why do I dread this? And is it time to move on to something else? Because that dread will infect your whole business if you let it go too long.
That's right. And I'm fortunate. I often say I'm very lucky. And I believe that I'm very lucky that I have a partner now that, I mean, he lives and breathes it more than I ever did, even in my, so
That's
to speak, prime of it, right? Never seen somebody with so much talent and ability. So I just lucky with that, but that's not always the case. That's hard to find.
Blessed is the right word.
It's not always within. So, all right. So, you brought up something earlier when you were talking about kind of your journey. And in that second scenario, when you guys did that alliance and merged, right? Was it a merger or acquisition, whatever?
We acquired them. Yeah.
All right. And so most people think that is only for bigger companies and bigger organizations. Can you debunk that a little bit and talk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's true. Most people think, they hear mergers or acquisitions and they think banks and airlines and, big, huge things. The reality is acquisitions and mergers happen all day long in smaller businesses. So I'll go back to the plumber situation, because you brought up a good point about, had that plumber done something while he was still alive, there could have been value there. So the reason that I got a call from that plumber's wife was because we had talked to that plumber about a year earlier, because I was working with a home services company to do what's called a roll up, which is where you roll up other businesses and you put them all into one to make the sum greater than its parts. So I was working with a client who was an air conditioning company. This is down in Texas, super seasonal business, right? Making tons of money in the summertime when it's hot and everybody's air conditioner is breaking. In the wintertime, the phone's not ringing. So he called and said, well, we want to make our business much more, season flat. So I'm looking at doing a roll up. So we helped him buy an electrical business. We helped him buy a plumbing business. We helped him buy a landscaping business. We helped him buy a pool business. And basically, we turned his company from an air conditioning repair company into a complete home services company. Now, this isn't a super multi-million dollar, or multi-billion dollar, whatever. This is a company that was doing maybe $2 million a year. And we went out, and for very little money out of his pocket, we went out and bought several other businesses and turned that into about a $10 million a year business, primarily through acquisitions. Could he have ever grown his $2 million a year air conditioning business to $10 million as a standalone? Probably not. He was kind of at his peak. He had his geography saturated. He had all the business he could kind of get with that business, but it was seasonal, right? And so by going out and buying lots of businesses some of those deals we bought for $750,000. We got one for like $1.1 million. We put all those together into one big company, and now he has a really profitable year-round revenue, year-round profit home services business that's worth substantially more than he ever would have. And this is just a guy who was an air conditioning guy who decided to do this, and we helped execute that strategy for him. Any industry can do that. I don't care what business you're in. Buy your competitor. Buy an ancillary business that's complementary to your business. Look up and down your supply chain. Who do you buy products and services from? They might be somebody you want to acquire. Who buys products and services from you? That might be somebody you want to acquire. There are opportunities for acquisitions, and they don't have to be huge. My very first acquisition that I bought myself was a bookkeeping firm that happened to be the bookkeeping firm I worked with. And I said, hey, I have a couple of, my businesses go through you. I know you're wanting to grow. You're a little 3-person firm now. You're interested in growing. You've asked me to help you grow. What if I take an investment in your business and I help you grow? I put all of my deals through you. I recommend everybody else put their deals through you, and we help you grow. She said, great. So for not one penny out of my pocket, I took an ownership stake in that business, helped it grow. Eventually it got sold and everybody won. And, that's an acquisition that like anybody can do. I don't know anything about bookkeeping. But I knew there was an opportunity there. And so I did an investment in that company. So opportunities for acquisitions are everywhere if you kind of open your eyes to it and look at the possibilities.
You said something interesting at the beginning of this, and that is you were able to acquire all these other smaller companies for very little cash out of pocket to this owner. How? Talk to us. Garrett, that's got to be everybody listening or watching. It's got to be thinking that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways of doing it. So way number one, especially in the United States, is to use an SBA loan. So if you buy your competitor, if they're a direct competitor with an SBA loan, well, let me back up. Let's say you have an auto repair shop and you have the option of buying the building next door and expanding your shop so you add more bays. And you go to the SBA and you say, I want to expand my business. Will you lend me money to do that? And they'll say yes. And they give you money to expand your business by adding more bays or whatever. Interestingly, what people don't realize is that if your competitor across the street is somebody you want to acquire, if you buy that business and they're a direct competitor, that's also an expansion loan. Well, guess what? The SBA doesn't ask for a down payment on that. They just give you the money to go do it. Just like if they gave you the money to expand your business, they give you the money to buy new tractors and equipment. If you're a construction business, whatever, they just give you that money. There are expansion loans available that you can go up to $5 million with not a penny out of your own pocket, buy your competition and fold it into your business. And now you've acquired up to a $5 million business without a single penny out of your pocket. That's the the easiest way to do it, honestly.
So the SBA, a couple questions with that. Mm-hmm. How do those rates typically compare to the bank?
Very favorable.
Okay.
Because they're government
and then also you mentioned that there were multiple businesses. I think you brought up landscaping and all the other things that got it rolled up into this. Do they limit how many of those loans, or is it 5 million per or 5 million total? How does that work?
Yeah. So in the case study I gave you of the HVAC company in Texas, we did not use SBA for most of those. I'm talking about kind of a one-off transaction if you find to buy your competitor. Okay. So SBA, it's a $5 million limit, and that can be for a single transaction, or it's basically a lifetime limit. So if you go out and buy $1 million business with an SBA loan, SBA 7A loan, you still have $4 million you could spend later, but they generally only allow you to do it once a year. So you could conceivably buy a $1 million business every year for the next 4 years without a single penny out of your own pocket with the SBA program. Or you can buy a $4 million business right out the gate, whatever the number is. But that must be only for a direct competitor of your business. Now, the method we used for this Texas example that I gave you was we built a holding company, and you talked about this plumber who, would he have had value to the business had he come on board before he passed away? And the answer is yes. What we did with those deals is we said, look, let's say your business is worth $750,000. We're gonna give you $250,000 up front, and the other $500,000 we're going to give you as equity in the rolled up company that we're building. Your business, as it sits right now, is worth a 3x multiple, meaning it's worth 3 times the profits. So what the company we're building, because it's much larger, it's going to have year-round revenue, it's going to have recurring revenue, etc. The company we're building is going to have a 12x multiple. And we're going to sell that company to a private equity firm when it's all done being built. So what we'd like to do is we'll give you $250,000 up front. The other $500,000 we're going to give you as equity in our business. And then that equity is going to increase in value at least 3 or 4x over the next 3 to 5 years. And then we're all going to cash out. And so the value of your business goes from 3 times profits to 12 times profits by doing what we're doing. So we bought most of those businesses using equity as currency. And we're able to buy, about $10 million worth of businesses for about $1.5 million in cash.
So let's talk growth. Let's shift directions a little bit, although kind of on it now. Let's talk growth a little bit. And when you talk about how you've went in and helped companies double their revenue without selling more, all right, that's the big thing. Are you talking about acquisitions, or is there another strategy?
What I'm talking about. Yeah. So when it used to be in the old days before I really had acquisitions as a tool. I was a marketing consultant, and I'm really good at marketing. I can help businesses increase their revenue substantially. But the reality is, if you have a business that's doing $1 million a year in revenue, and you want to try and figure out how to get it to do $2 million a year, it's really difficult. When you have that kind of initiative, you're probably going to spend more on advertising, which means, guess what? Your advertising is probably going to be less effective, because the more you scale your advertising, the harder it is to make it effective. You're probably going to have to hire more salespeople. Not all of them are going to work out, so you might have some bad hires. Overall, when you try and scale a business, especially if you try and scale a business rapidly, it costs more to do than just to stay flatline. And so even if you doubled the revenues from 1 million to 2 million, more than likely your profit margins are going to go down. And that's what most businesses see. Nobody ever accounts for that. But the reality is, I think you'll agree, so if you doubled your business in revenue, even if say over a 2-year period, it's probably going to be slightly less profitable revenue, because it just costs more to do that. Would you agree?
Correct. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, and it's risky, and you don't know if it's going to work, and you don't know if these new marketing initiatives are going to work. Some of them are not going to, trust me. Some of the new salespeople are not going to work out, trust me. So what's a better way?
Growth can be expensive.
Growth can be very expensive. But instead, what I say is, you can do it $1 million a year. You look around at your competition, find out who else is doing $1 million a year at the same profit margin you have. If you're a 20% margin company and they're doing $1 million a year at 20% profit margin, if you acquire them and just put the two together overnight, you've now doubled the size of your business, and you've still matched your profit margin. And in fact, you may even be more profitable, because there may be some redundancies there that you're able to save in economies of scale. And so overnight, you can double your business, double your revenue, and double your profits at a very low risk. Because if you buy a competitor, they're already existing. They already have a track record. They already have existing customers. They already have existing revenue. They already have a system that's working, or they wouldn't be your competitor. And it's much less risky than going out and trying new programs, sales initiatives, or marketing initiatives, or everything else that may or may not work. If you buy your competitor, you know that what they're doing is working, or they wouldn't be a competitor to you. So that's a strategy that most business owners don't think about. And they think, wow, that seems really, really risky. But the reality is it more risky to put a whole bunch of money into unknown initiatives? Or is it less risky to put money into leveraged money, by the way? Because you buy that $1 million business, the most you're going to put down is 10%. And the reality is, you could probably put down 0 and put that on top of your business and double it overnight. So why wouldn't you take that as a potential option?
So let's talk a little bit about succession planning. I love what you said early on. 100% of business owners exit their business one way or the other, right?
It's true.
So why is it so critical to have a succession plan in place? And then, probably more importantly, if you don't have one, how's it hurt?
Yeah. Absolutely. This is something a lot of business owners don't think about. They think it's long way in the future, and that can come back and bite them. You do want a succession plan. Are you gonna hold this business until you retire? Great. What happens then? Have you even thought about it? Who's going to take it when you retire? Is it kids? Is it family? Is it key employees? Who is that? And you want to be thinking about that now, even if that's 20 years down the road. You want to be thinking about that, because things can happen that I call 5 Ds and a B. Okay, 5 Ds and a B: divorce, disease, death, debt, disagreements, which is partnerships. Yours has gone well, luckily, but they go south a lot. And the B is burnout. Those things can happen whether you plan on it or not. So, you have insurance for your car, even though you don't ever plan on getting into an accident. You have, insurance for, you probably have a will for your life, even though you don't plan on dying anytime soon. Most people don't have a succession plan for their business because they don't plan on leaving their business, but the reality is they're going to leave their business someday or another. The other thing is that if you do the things that it takes to get your business ready for sale, if you always have it prepared for sale, which means that you've, exited yourself out of the day-to-day operations of the business doesn't revolve around you. You've created streamlined processes. Your financials are in good shape. You've done all the things that are needed to prepare your business to be sold at a moment's notice in case one of those things does happen, the 5 Ds and the B, like be prepared for those. Guess what happens? Even if you don't ever actually exit your business is going to be such more of a pleasure to own. It's going to be a business that you're working less in and making more money and enjoy owning if you've done all the steps needed to prepare your business for sale. So there's no downside to preparing your business for sale. No matter what your plan is or how long you plan to keep the business, you should still do the steps you need to prepare it for sale.
So you just said something I want to talk about a little bit. So I told you about how I went through a burnout phase and got emotionally detached.
Mm-hmm.
That made it easy for me to let go when I knew I had someone in place that could take it and really run with it, right?
Right.
But what do you say to the person if their business is worth more, the less they're involved in meaning in selling it, right? What do you say to the entrepreneur that is just so emotionally connected and attached, and they struggle letting go?
Yeah, and that's very common. I mean, for most entrepreneurs, you spend more time with your business than you do with your family or your kids or anything else. Especially if you've built something from the ground up, and turned it into something that's successful, it becomes part of your identity. And the emotional aspects of selling a business are not to be ignored, and they are very important to think about. We work with clients who range from, young software developers who are, building and flipping businesses every 3 years to, to owners who've had their business 20, 25, 30 years. And it literally is their life's work, and everything in between. The emotional aspect of it is something that needs to be considered. Businesses like to say, oh, all of our team is like family and stuff like that. And for some, it's more true than others. And for some, it's lip service. But in many small businesses, especially, it's true because they actually are family. A lot of times you might have your kids working there, or your cousins, or your aunt might be doing the books or whatever else. And so, that's a whole other issue that comes into play. But so some people, their identity is wrapped up in their business, and they may never sell their business. They may.
It's a good way to say it.
They may literally die, and they'll die at their desk, right? And if that's you, fine. But what happens the day after you die at your desk? It's not a comfortable topic that we want to talk about, but what happens? Who's taking that business over? Are you leaving your family with a business that's unsellable, and they think they're going to sell it for millions of dollars as part of your kind of, succession planning or your financial planning for your, after you die, after you pass on? But does it have value? These are the questions you need to ask. It's okay if you never sell your business. Like I said, you're going to exit your business one way or the other, but you better be prepared for all the options, and especially make sure your family's prepared for all the options. So
when we were talking about how much a business is worth or how do you value it, you talked a little bit about intellectual property. If I've got something that, first off, define what actual valuable intellectual property is, and then how would a business owner go about leveraging that?
So valuable intellectual property would be legally protected patents or trademarks that have generated revenue in the marketplace. So a patent by itself has very little value until it's actually in use in the market. So let's say you have a machine shop. You're a tool and die fabrication business, and you have patented some processes that are your proprietary processes that allow you to do some very special things with, CNC or something. That's intellectual property, and you use that to create very specific parts for NASA. Okay. That's an example of potentially intellectual property, because you're using a patented process or method, maybe a patented machine, to create something of value that people can only buy from you. That is intellectual property that has value. And that could be related to, like I said, a piece of equipment, a tool, a process, etc. What people misconception is they have a patent on something, and the patent itself invariably has intrinsic value. And the reality is there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of filed registered patents that have never that are completely useless. Nobody's ever actually done anything with them. So intellectual property is generally something that like that. Generally, it needs to be legally protected. Intellectual property that's not legally protected is worth much less. Trademarks, so everybody knows that, like, Coca-Cola is, a valuable as a trademark. Now, why is Coca-Cola valuable as a trademark? Because they have spent billions of dollars creating the ad campaigns to make it valuable as a trademark. So if you have a trademark that has no exposure, that has no value. And so you've got to have success in the marketplace with your intellectual property in order for that intellectual property to have value. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. So let's say someone in our audience hires you to either do some type of merger or acquisition. Okay. All right. Let me reverse it. Let me say someone has reached out to them because they want to buy their company, some type of merger or acquisition. And somebody in our audience hires you because they want to maximize the value of their business. What's that look like? What do you do?
Yes.
How do you set that up?
So either way, whether you're hearing this and you're like, oh man, I like that idea of growing through acquisition, and I want to go find some businesses to buy and grow my business. Or more likely, because especially in certain sectors, you're getting calls regularly of people that want to buy your company. That's actually really common right now. If you're getting calls from people that want to buy your company, yes, you want to bring in a professional to represent your side of the deal to make sure that you're getting the best possible outcome. If you, because you don't know if it's a good deal or not if you have nothing to compare it to. Somebody, calls you up and says, hey, I'll give you $2 million for your business. And you're like, wow, that's great, I'll sell it. What if your business was worth $5 million and you don't know it because you didn't bring somebody in to tell you that? What if the terms were different? Like, my very first deal ever, I mean, we sold it for $1.5 million. I wish I'd have hired somebody to tell me, well, you really should probably only take half that in cash and half that in equity, because you'll make a lot more on the roll-up that this company's doing. Nobody told me that because I didn't ask. So if somebody's calling you and wanting to buy your business, then yeah, you want to bring in an advisor for your side. And actually you need 3 advisors on any business acquisition. You need a legal advisor, you need a financial advisor, and that usually is going to involve tax planning. And then you need an acquisitions advisor. And I wouldn't do any deal without all 3 of those.
That's the one they probably leave out. I would have, like, for instance, if and I'll tell you, I'll say, I think the legal part they probably all do, right?
Mm-hmm. And attorneys are horrible negotiators, by the way.
Yeah, so you got that, but then they probably eventually bring in the financial part, but usually later in the process than the financial guy would have liked to have been involved in. So because to do proper tax planning, right, there's different ways they need to start thinking about these things instead of getting out to the end of the year and say, hey, I sold that business. What do we do? And there's no time left to maneuver and do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why it's critical you have all three of those components, because your acquisitions advisor is going to help you maximize the deal, maximize the value of the deal, the structure of the deal, and make sure that you're selling to the right buyer. Because, just because somebody's offering you money doesn't mean they're the right buyer. But if now you're in a mindset to sell, maybe we need to go find a different buyer for you that's going to be a better fit. Your legal advisor is obviously going to protect you legally, and your tax advisor is going to protect you from a tax standpoint. And you absolutely want all three of those, and you absolutely want to engage all three of those as early as possible in the process. We like to be involved 3 years prior to an actual exit. That's our optimal time to be involved, is 3 years prior.
Well, because they're going to look back at 3 years, right?
3-year look back. Exactly. Perfect. Yep. Got it. You've got it. So what does that mean for our audience? Well, in any acquisition, the last 3 years of your business are what's going to be investigated deeply in due diligence. If 2 of the last 3 years, things were not great, but maybe just the last year you finally got straightened up, they're going to heavily discount the last 2 years. So one of the things that I always advise sellers, business owners, is, one of the biggest mistakes I see is business owners who say, "Oh, I hardly made any profit at all on paper, because that way it saves me taxes." Okay, great. Guess what happens? That's called a tax mitigation strategy, and it's very common with business owners, and I hear it all the time. But what did we learn about earlier in this discussion? Businesses are valued on profit. So if you're doing everything you can to show little to no profit in your business for tax reasons, you're also killing your business valuation possibilities. So you need to look at it and say, okay, for every $1 I save in taxes, I may be leaving $5 on the table with valuation of my business. Does a tax mitigation strategy make sense? No, it doesn't. You need to, 3 years in advance, you need to go to your tax professional and say, I'm getting ready to sell this business. I need to show the maximum profit I can for this 3-year period so that I can increase the valuation.
Let's say I hire you, and of course I don't do this, but let's just say I hire you. Aren't there going to be some non-reoccurring expenses that maybe drove down profit that could be explained and shown and say, listen, this is the selling price because of this? Because once you buy, these expenses may not be there.
Yeah, that's different than tax mitigation, though.
Okay.
Those are called add backs, and
that's right.
We've seen them applied quite liberally. And of course, your job as the seller is to rationalize and justify as many add backs as you can, and the job of the potential buyer is to argue against every single one of those as much as they can. And it's all part of the fun of the dance of negotiations.
All right, so somebody's in our audience. They're either thinking, preparing to sell and or really want to explode growth. What's the one piece of advice you want to give them?
I'm going to give different advice to each one. So if you're looking to grow your business through acquisition, the one piece of advice I would give you is, do not do that unless your business is operating smoothly. Buying another business is not a Band-Aid to cover up the flaws in your current business. Only do it if your business is rocking and rolling smoothly, then build on top of that. But if you still have work to do in your own house, don't go buy another one.
That's great advice.
And then for people who are thinking about selling their business, prepare at least 3 years in advance, period. So 3 and 3, right? Have 3 people involved and start the process 3 years in advance.
Awesome. Marty, I got to tell you, I was excited. I knew this was going to be a good episode, good show for everybody. I want to thank you a lot for sharing your wisdom, your insights.
It's exciting.
Man, if a business owner, well, we've talked about it. I mean, if a business owner isn't thinking about this, like you said, 100% at some point exit, they need to start. And if nothing else, if they're prepared to sell, right? Or in your case, got their business so healthy that they're in a good spot to acquire and really boost growth. Whether they do either, they win.
Right.
So,
right. You can't lose by doing what I'm telling you to do.
So I absolutely love it. A lot of good stuff in this. This is this is one of the best episodes. You know what I loved about it is you were so specific with what you shared, actionable stuff. To me, that's, at least when I'm listening to a podcast, that's what I look for. What can I walk away with, write down and be like, all right, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. And you gave us that. So I really appreciate it. For those of you in the audience, whether you're listening or watching us and you want to explore the value of your business, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Marty, but you offer a free, literally no obligation business valuation. And I want to make sure I get this right, is westboundroad.com, correct?
Yeah. Yep. Westboundroad.com.
So go there, no obligation. He will help you with the value of your business in terms of determining what that is. So make sure you check it out and figure out what your business is currently worth. And then more importantly, what it could take to double, triple, quadruple, or, multiply that. So, and as always, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to Me Plus Ultra at meplusultra.com. And by the way, Marty, we will put westboundroad.com. So if someone isn't in a position, maybe they're driving and they don't want to write that down and have trouble remembering, if they go to Me Plus Ultra at meplusultra.com, we'll have it in our show description so they can have an easy link to you as well.
Sounds good.
So make sure you do that. And then also go to YouTube, Me Plus Ultra Network, and subscribe to us there. That way you stay up to date on all our upcoming shows and interviews with top business leaders like Marty here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Business, Bourbon, and Cigars. Cheers, everyone.